Greetings fellow mammals, intros should be short, so let me just say this. This guide is for players of every skill level, mainly for PC players, but still useful for consiglieros, and it does include a fix for the game's broken mouse input. With that out of the way, let's get right to it. Now, you might already have the game up and running, but we have to do some stuff before that, so close the game please and follow along. The very first thing we'll do now is check if you are actually using your hardware to the fullest potential, or if Windows is holding it back. We will start with your monitor. Simply right-click on your desktop and open up the display settings. Then go down here to the advanced settings and make sure you are actually using the highest refresh rate your monitor offers. Also, if you are not that familiar with the hardware, make sure to remember these values here, or maybe even write them down. We will need both your refresh rate and your screen resolution again quite soon. Now that we have checked your monitor, we can do another little thing to slightly improve your performance. Type game mode into the search bar here, go into here and turn this on. This little switch reduces the resources your PC uses in the background whenever you're playing a game. And now we search for mouse. Open up the mouse settings here and turn this little thing off at the top. And then open up the additional settings at the bottom here, go to pointer settings and make sure this slider is right in the middle, or in other terms, right on the 6th dot. And also uncheck this box right here. Hit apply and OK. Now if you have any type of decent gaming mouse, you might also have a specific software or app for it. If you do, open it up and try to find out what your DPI is if you don't already know, and then also write that down. Once you have all that, we can do a little FPS fix, because there's a setting that makes them drop whenever you aim down sights, and we obviously do not want that. Simply go into your files, usually you should find right under Documents, Battlefield 2042, Settings, and here you should see a file called profsave_profile. Open it up and press Ctrl F to search for weapon DOF. That should take you right here. If not, just scroll all the way down. It's right there at the bottom. And here you simply have to change the 1 into a 0. Hit save or Ctrl S, and then we can close this and finally open up the actual game. How exciting. Starting off easy. You don't have to do anything on this page, which means we can immediately move on to the next one, the network page. And once again, nothing to do here. So let's move on to the display tab where we actually have to do something. First off, Battlefield is notorious for running bad in anything else than full screen mode, so be sure to have that selected. And here is also the place where you can select the values we looked up earlier in your Windows settings for the resolution and refresh rate. Make sure those match and that you are actually using your equipment to its fullest potential. As you can see, the highest refresh rate for my setup is for some reason the second choice in that lineup there. No idea why, but just as a note so you don't accidentally skip the highest one, assuming it will be the last one in a row. It might not be. For the field of view, as you can see, I prefer to play on the maximum, but please keep in mind, I am playing on a 21:9 widescreen display, so any lens distortion, aka the fisheye look as you may know it, is less harsh on my end. Should you not mind that, going all in with the field of view is what I would recommend. If you run a normal 16:9 monitor and you prefer having just a reasonable amount of lens distortion, I would aim for something around 90 or higher. High field of views help you with your awareness. It makes you feel faster, which can have a nice placebo effect on some people's gameplay, and recoil also feels more manageable. The downsides are smaller targets and a higher impact on your performance. After all, the more you can see, the more your PC has to render, right? If none of these values interest you and you just want to copy your go-to FOV from other games you play, be aware that these numbers here are the vertical field of view. Usually, other games let you select the horizontal field of view. I do not know why DICE keeps on doing this in every single title, but I have found a little tool online where you can just put in your usual FOV and screen resolution, and it will tell you what the corresponding value has to be here. So, just to show you how this works, I put my resolution in here and my usual horizontal FOV in here, and then I would just copy what it puts out here into the game. You can find the link to this little tool in the description down below. Now for the vehicle field of view, just use the maximum. There's basically no recoil you have to control, and being able to see as much of your surroundings as possible is a massive help in almost every vehicle. This setting here used to be off by default, so if you have been playing this game for a while, please check if this is still turned off for you. It should be on. If you just got the game, it should be on for you by default, so just don't touch it. Brightness and HDR all depend on your monitor and your own preferences, therefore I cannot help you here. Just use what looks right to you, although I would say the game looks just fine if you don't touch them at all. Now motion blur, chromatic aberration and vignette are all artificial effects to make the game look more cineastic, more Michael Bay, if you catch my drift. I think that's good and dandy for movies, but for games it just means you can't see shit. Therefore, I prefer to have them all deactivated or reduced to 0. Graphics depend a lot on your rig and approach to gaming in general. For that reason, I have watched multiple tests and reviews as well as guides and benchmarks over the years, and I finally came upon one video by a channel named Game Guides that fully met my expectations for such a breakdown. I can highly recommend watching it to really get a clear understanding of each graphic setting and its impact on performance. You can find this link in the description too. The choices I made are based on his video and my personal preference. It is neither the highest fidelity nor aimed at the best performance. It is a mix of a good looking game but without impacting gameplay and visual clarity. So if your system can handle either just fine, you might as well copy what I have picked here. Regardless of which method you choose, there are 2 settings that should be exempt from your choice. Number 1, undergrowth quality. This determines the amount of shrubbery present on the maps. Therefore, it should be set to the lowest amount possible, so that you can easily spot mines, claymores, or even enemy players lying around in the open fields. Number 2 is high fidelity objects amount. This determines the amount of objects on the screen and around you that use the highest detail of animation, graphic fidelity, and sound at the same time. Always keep this as high as possible with your performance in mind. And should you need to lower your graphics settings after some testing, make sure to lower everything else first before you touch this one. Down here we get to some stuff that once more depends on your setup, what graphics card you have, etc. If you have an NVIDIA card that is capable of DLSS, these settings here are what I would choose. If your monitor does not support G-Sync or the equivalent from AMD and you do experience some screen tearing, then you might want to switch on vertical sync at the bottom here, otherwise always turn this off. That's it for the graphics department. Now let's move on to some more gameplay related stuff. Lots of things we do not need to worry about here, but 2 little settings that can immediately make the game feel better. HUD motion and camera shake. Both suck. Turn them off or down as much as the game allows. And down here we get into the real personal preference territory. All of this is completely up to you. If you like how my gameplay looks and the UI colors I have, you can just copy these here or create your own color palette. Watch out to really make the colors pop though. Even the default red for enemies isn't really a red, so if you like the basic colors, I would still switch to custom and just make them pop more. However, the one thing I will say is keep it consistent across the other color choices we will encounter later too. Try to stick to a clear color palette. Moving on, we get to a real game changer, damage numbers. These can massively improve your performance on the battlefield. The more information you can get about the state of your enemy, the better. You can see that I arranged it so that the numbers pop up in the lower right corner of my crosshairs. That's just where I like them. Obviously, you can move them around to wherever you prefer. The chat isn't all that important. Do with it whatever you like, but I would like to encourage you to enable all chat just because this has been a basic feature in every single past title, and in this one they decided to launch it without one at all, and when they finally patched it in, they turned it off by default. Apparently the reasoning behind that choice is that enemy players might call you nasty things and your feelings might get hurt. This could of course not be allowed by a modern development studio. I do not subscribe to this ideology and I would like for more people to speak out against this bullshit. So just do me a favor, turn it on, grow a pair, and be vocal if the next Battlefield game doesn't have one either. All of these bars at the bottom here are at the minimum, with 2 exceptions. The minimap, because that one is actually important, and the padding. Padding basically just moves all the UI elements closer to the middle, which is a great feature for people like me who use a widescreen display. If you have a regular monitor, you can probably just ignore this. One note though, if you are a new player and not yet familiar with the UI, maybe put the bars at 75 and not 50 for all the others. Once you get more acquainted with everything, you can turn them down all the way. Most of it is irrelevant anyway. Next page. The only really important changes here are the color of your crosshairs and that you turn off crosshair projection. I like to use a bright pink for my crosshairs across almost all games because that is simply a color that does not appear that often in the usual game world and therefore is easy to see. Some people like bright yellow or neon green as well. The impact point icon is only relevant for pilots, but it can't hurt to choose the cross setting because it is simply easier to see. And you also want to pick a color that is not the same as your crosshairs here, so you can easily distinguish the two from another. I picked yellow for this one and it has served me well. Quick reminder to keep it consistent. You can copy what I have or stick to your palette. Just make sure the hit color and the armor hit color are not the same. And a little hint at the side, these colors here affect how the damage numbers from before appear. So pick something you can read clearly. And at the bottom here we have the hit indicators. So the little markings telling you where you are getting shot from. I would recommend choosing different colors for these two so that in the heat of battle you can quickly tell if it's just some guy shooting at you or a rocket barrage from a vehicle far away. Also turn down the thickness here. It's already a pretty massive indicator for vehicle damage. Time to fix your minimap. Let's get to the next page. The minimap scale should already be bumped up from a change we did earlier. This is one of many settings that will appear multiple times. They are synchronized though, so if you change them on another page, they will adjust everywhere else too. So we will just leave it at 125 here and fix the rest down below. Personally, I like to max out all of the minimap ranges, just because 75 meters is good enough to tell what's going on around you while also being able to plan ahead. 150 meters is good for tanks, so you can easily spot any enemy vehicles approaching you. And 600 meters for jets might seem excessive at first, but this means you can almost always see the enemy's spawn area on it. And that is massively important so that you can always catch when the enemy jet respawns. Therefore, I can comfortably recommend all of these at the maximum value. If you dislike that after some playtime, you can change it later. And with this setup of the bars at the bottom here, you can easily see what's going on behind your minimap while still having a clear view on the terrain and structures on it. For the big map, I have a slightly different approach, because this one is mostly used while flying. Therefore, it needs to be as see-through as possible while still being legible. And because it's not centered around you, the FOV opacity has to be maxed out so you can quickly spot yourself on it. If you only play infantry, this setup also works just fine. That is it for the maps. Now we have to fix what's actually going on where you are looking 99% of the time to the next page. I have rewritten my script for this part multiple times, and yet it was still unnecessarily long and convoluted. Therefore, I just scrapped it. I will not explain how this all works and just give you the solution. You will have to trust me on this one. Just do what I did and put these at 0, 0, 100, 100, and then do the same thing again. You will notice a pattern for the rest of this page. Just try and stick with me here. The basic approach is this. We want to remove any icons from your screen whenever they are not needed. For example, you do not need to see a teammate's revive icon on the ground whenever you are aiming and shooting as an enemy. And with this approach in mind, please just copy what you see here. I will slowly scroll along and you can just pause whenever you need to and change your stats accordingly. Now we have fixed the game for your eyes, time to fix it for your ears. How loud you need your game to be is obviously depending on you. And if you like to have the music on or some guy constantly telling you what objective you are losing and whatnot is up to your liking. But there's one thing here that can really change how the game feels, and that is the audio mix. I have always and will probably always use the 3D headphone setting. It massively improves the ability to track footsteps and other sounds around you, and especially when you are using good headphones. It's probably one of the most important settings to improve your gameplay. Voice chat, on the other hand, most often is not. But I would say it's still counter to have it on for that one random guy you encounter every few matches that actually sticks to the squad and gives decent callouts. And if someone is annoying, you can just mute them or turn it off in a second. Subtitles are unnecessary to me, so I turned them off. But it really doesn't matter. It's just one less thing on the screen. And now we have reached the controller tab. And this is where things get a little wonky. As I said in the intro, this video is mostly for PC players. I am not a console player and I have never even owned a controller. So everything I will say about this section is related to the game's fucked up mouse input and how the controller settings impact that. Don't ask me how one of the major shooter franchise studios managed to pull this off, but yes. The controller settings affect your mouse input. And there are a lot of things we have to change. There is no 100% fix, and the devs never managed or cared enough to fix it either. So this is as good as it will get. Before we can do that though, we first have to actually set up your mouse and keyboard. That means we will skip this tab for now and return once we are done with the next one. At this moment, I'd like to make another change of order. I will go over all the keybinds after we are done with the rest of the settings. If you skip to this part for the keybinds only, look a bit further ahead. I named the chapter accordingly. And now let's finally get into the mouse and keyboard stuff. On this here first page, simply turn the top one to off and make sure that the raw mouse input on the bottom is turned on. Next page. To give you some reference, my mouse is set to a DPI of 1600 and I use an in-game sensitivity of 2. So if you want to simply copy my settings, just use the rule of 3 if you have a different DPI and set up the in-game sense accordingly. By the way, you can also go into the fractions by using your arrow keys if necessary. Field of view we have set up before, so the interesting part here is really only the uniform soldier aiming. This mechanic has somewhat become a matter of faith in the Battlefield community, and there are mainly 3 schools of thought around it. The first one is to simply not use it, meaning turning it off. The second one is dividing your screen's resolution like you would in a math task, then multiplying the result times 100 and using that final number as the base for the settings coefficient. Let me give you an example on how that would play out. Let's say you have a 1920 by 1080p display. Then you would divide 1920 by 1080, which gives us 1.777777 and so on, which we then multiply by 100, and so we can finally set the coefficient for uniform soldier aiming to 177.7. Pretty simple actually. And last but not least, there are the followers of the Holy Zero. I count myself as one of them. I have used both of the other methods before, for weeks on end actually, but in the end I just liked how Zero felt more. So either you pick one of these methods and apply them, or you do as I did and try them all out for some time each, or you follow my lead and go with Zero from the start. Do what pleases you most. But for the sake of muscle memory, once you find one you like, stick to it. And now we get to a few more personal choices. I like to hold down the sprint button, because that's how all the games I play usually do it, and I like consistency. Sprint to vault over is also a neat little setting, so you get stuck on small objects a little less likely. Matching the holding a sprint mindset, I also turn on this one, so the game simply overrides the slower sprint speed and just always uses the traversal one. Yes, the game has 2 sprint speeds. No one needs that in a Battlefield game, and it's also just annoying having to double tap the sprint key every single time so you get to the fast version. Steady scope here we will ignore for now because it will come up later in the keybinds chapter. Here's a little more niche thing. Sometimes when you spawn on a transport helicopter, it has just been blown up. And now you're falling out of the sky. Usually the game then auto deploys your parachute. Here is why I dislike that. If whatever air vehicle you just spawned on has been destroyed, that means someone is most likely still looking at it. And a single guy slowly floating down on his parachute makes for a great follow-up target. That is why I prefer to fall and pull the parachute when I deem it to be necessary. That means, of course, that you have to be a little more aware of where you are spawning and be quick on the keyboard if the situation calls for it. Another little change I carried over for Battlefield 5 is the toggle request and skip revive thing. Because in that game, if you held down the request button, the time it took to bleed out was actually longer. But it was also annoying having to hold this button the entire time until someone revived you. So switching that to a simple toggle just made sense. And I merely carried this over because I grew so accustomed to it. Sorrow of editing here, I just saw the Battlefield playtest leaks and it seems like the Battlefield 5 revive mechanic will be returning, so now this little change just got slightly more useful to you, because you can already build muscle memory for a mechanic in a game that hasn't even released yet, so might as well, right? Back to the script. At the bottom here is the first of a few annoying switcheroos we will have to do in order to fix the mouse input. We want to turn off the zoom transition smoothing, but it is grayed out right now, because up top we have uniform soldier aiming enabled. So we have to scroll up real quick, turn this off for a second, go back down here, and now we can turn this off, and finally go back up again, and not forget to switch this one back on. Apart from that, do not touch any of the sliders at the bottom. And now we will do the same thing for the vehicles. For the vehicle sense, I like to use my soldier sense times 3, so 6. Again, field of view reappears, but down here we have some personal choices once more. Just as with the soldier sprint, I prefer to have my vehicle boost as a hold as well. It just feels more natural, like pushing down on a gas pedal and not just tapping a key once and tapping it again to go slower. Here we have the inverted aircraft stuff, but this too we have already done earlier, but right below it we have the flying sense. I'll just go full ham here. Vehicles in this game can be really maneuverable, but I will get into flying during the keybind chapter a bit more. And all the way down here, we encounter uniform aiming once more, but this time for vehicles. Now, to be fair, I don't really see the point in it while you are in a vehicle, but it also never bothered me in any way. And for the sake of consistency, I also turn it on here and make sure to use the same value for it. So in my case, that would be a 0 again. Oh, and before I forget it, turn on this last thing here. This makes your turret stay on target, or rather where you are aiming, while you turn the chassis. Very useful little feature. It is time to finally fix the controller section now. Bear with me here, it's gonna be a bit tedious, but before we even move over there, please remember the values you chose for your soldier and vehicle sensitivity, because we are going to need them again. We can skip both of these pages, thankfully, and get right into the on-foot stuff. First off, I need you to set the sensitivity slider here to the exact same value that you picked for it in the mouse and keyboard tab. And as a warning, if you should ever change your sensitivity again, you also have to change it here too, so that it works correctly. Just remember that. Turn down these 3 bars all to 0. Do the second one first, because it grays out if the first one is already 0. And then we can move down a tiny bit and also set this bar to 0. And to save some time, we will turn off the uniform soldier aiming here and then scroll all the way down, set these 2 bars both to 100 and turn off the transition smoothing again. And as you might have guessed by now, we are going back up and turning uniform soldier aiming back on. Now let's do the same shit for the vehicle page. Just as before, put in the sensitivity you picked for vehicles in the keyboard part, and at the bottom here reduce the acceleration to 0 once more. And now all the way down again. Thankfully we don't have to scroll around this time because uniform vehicle aiming is right here. So turn it off for a second, make sure these 2 are both set to 100 and then turn it back on. That's it. That is as much as we can do to fix the mouse input in this game. Once more, as a reminder, every time you change your sensitivity from here on out, you have to also change it in the respective controller page. Please remember that. These other 2 pages here we can just ignore and move straight into the accessibility tab. Here we have a lot of returning stuff from before, but if we go down a little, we can find reduce sprint camera motion. Very nice to have, and we can change the flashbang effect from white to black. you probably won't encounter them often, but when you do, a black screen is much more comfortable than a bright white one. And if you ever played Zane before, you might be familiar with his passive trait. Here at the bottom, you can change how loud and bright that is. I have never had an issue with it, so I just kept it at 100. But I'm just saying you could adjust that here. And these last 2 pages we can skip completely. We already did the subtitle stuff earlier, and control is just another collection of mirrored settings. Congratulations, we have fixed and improved everything we could settings-wise. Now there's only one thing left to do. Keybinds. 3 things before we get into it. Firstly, I have a German keyboard. The only thing noteworthy for you though is just that Y and Z are switched. So whenever you see Y in the settings, it's Z if you have an English keyboard. Secondly, I use a mouse with 3 thumb buttons. If you want to copy my keybinds 1-to-1, you will need one like that too, or more buttons on the mouse somewhere else. On the right, you can see what my mouse looks like and what I have these buttons set up as. And thirdly, the basic idea for my setup here is to keep my WASD fingers as unbothered as possible. I want to be able to move in all directions at all times. Therefore, I try to move every other task they usually have to do on default settings to my other fingers or even to my other hand. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. First thing I change here is the seat switch. I only use this in vehicles with 2 seats though, so this will be more important to change on the jet and helicopter pages later, but for consistency's sake I have changed it here too. Then here on the movement, I put the crouch hold on Alt and the crouch toggle on X. I only use my thumb for Alt and spacebar. And since spacebar is jumping, it only makes sense to give my thumb another task. And you can neither crouch while jumping, nor jump while crouching. So this is the perfect fit, and it will feel quite natural pretty fast. At the bottom here we have descent, which I also set to Alt. This is basically just Casper's drone going downwards. And this is another consistency thing for me. Alt will always be downwards, and spacebar will always be upwards, motion-wise. Make sure to delete the duplicates here. Apart from that, I make it so that whenever I scroll forward or up, I will switch to my primary weapon, and whenever I scroll backwards or down, I will switch to my secondary. This is a very reliable and quick way to always equip exactly what you want. To continue that trend, I put the specialist gadget on my upper front thumb button on my mouse and the normal gadget on the upper back one. And remember here that my front thumb button on my mouse counts as a 5. So my class gadget doesn't have to be changed here binding wise, but it is actually on my mouse. One optional choice here is to put your grenade on a scroll wheel press. I have to be honest, I did this a long while ago and I don't think I ever used it. My muscle memory for G is just so ingrained into my brain I cannot shake it off. Then I put the underbarrel on C, because for me that is more comfortable to press than X. And I also barely use toggle crouch anyway. Steady scope is a neat trick. If you just double bind right click here, you will automatically hold breath whenever you aim with a sniper. Just make sure to not endlessly look through the scope or you will run out of breath eventually. And all the way down here we have to delete a few more duplicates for the scroll wheel. Now we are getting into the vehicles. Here the big map is a bit more important than it is as infantry, and therefore I put it on 5, which means my front mouse button for quick access. Again with the seat switch on control here. No changes on this page, and delete the duplicates here. Do the scroll wheel primary secondary thing again and place the gunner skill on your upper back thumb button. And now we will repeat this exact same thing, basically a few times more. The full map thing, the change seat thing. A small new thing we can do here is put the handbrake on the spacebar. That's where it is on every other vehicle, but not on this one for some reason. Just dice things, I don't know. And we already did this before, it's the exact same thing again. Delete this stuff, put the scroll wheel thing here, and these 2 on the thumb buttons. One more time, full map, change seat, nothing here again. The skills on the thumb buttons like before. And now we can get to the pilot where we have to do a bit more. Before we get to the new stuff though, one more time, full map and change seat. And now we can actually talk about piloting. The setup I use here is called rifle aim for pilots. It's basically what every pilot main uses, and I would say it is actually easier to learn and get good at than it is with the default. So changing this is not only what you would do if you want to become a flying ace, you should actually just do this from the start so you can avoid wasting time on the shitty default setup. If you want me to do a demonstration or basically a how to fly guide, let me know in the comments. For now, we will just change it without looking deeper into it. This video is long enough already. So delete these two, bind the yaw right and left to the movement of your mouse in those directions, set pitch down to Alt and pitch up to spacebar, roll right on D, roll left on A, and delete the mouse here. That's it already. Now you can learn how to fly like the pros from the get-go. What we change here should be familiar by now. Delete these, scroll wheel here, thumb buttons there, and now we do this exact same setup for the helicopter page too. Change seat, full map, delete these, move the mouse, right and left, Alt for down, space for up, D for right, A for left, and delete these two. And one last time, delete these two, do the scroll wheel thing, and the thumb button thing. And on this very last page, you could pick a different key for your push to talk binding. I have Z here, or Z, but remember, for you, that is probably a Y. And that's it. You made it all the way through. Thank you for sticking with me for this long. If you found any of this helpful at all, I would appreciate a like. And if you have something to criticize or have further questions about anything, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. Share this video with your squad mates so we can all benefit from a better experience. And if you want to see more guides like this one, consider subscribing. That is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the battlefield. Zoro out.